Hey guys, Seth the Mad Dog here, and wanted to do maybe a bit of a more uncomfortable video again. But this week, I really wanted to talk about kind of what's been buzzing around the community lately, and it seems to come up usually once or twice a year, but cheating in 40k and what I think we can do about it, because I think at this point, I am probably in the best position I've been in terms of my experience with the community to try to help this problem. So, before we get too far into it, cheating is not wildly out of control in 40k. The vast majority of players are playing honestly and fair Warhammer, but there are a few bad actors out there that are kind of spoiling it for the rest of us. And I think it's time, if we as a community want to grow and become a more serious competitive community and grow and be more welcoming to new players, it's time for us to get serious with how to deal with them. And I think the current system isn't doing the best it could be. And so I'm not affiliated with anyone anymore. I don't work for a company. I don't have sponsors. I don't have an NDA. I'm in the best position to be the voice of, hey, this is how I think we can do it. So let's get right into it. How can we stop cheating in Warhammer 40k? I think this is pretty straightforward. There's 4 parts that we need to address here. We need to change the severity of infractions. I'll get more to this in a minute. We need to increase the player reporting, specifically players reporting to the judges and TOs. We need more active judging. And then most importantly, we need a tracking of infractions. Let's go through these one at a time. First up, changing the severity of infractions. Current system of infractions is usually a yellow card system. You get 1 yellow as a warning, and that might also be a points penalty for that game or the next game. The second yellow is a disqualification. It escalates too quickly. This is going to feed into our problem with player reporting, and it doesn't give judges a whole lot of leeway. You can give 1 yellow, or you can give 2 yellows and they're out. That's it. So the current system really escalates very quickly, and that can disincentivize judges from issuing infractions, and that can disincentivize players from calling a judge when they feel an infraction is occurring. And I'm going to say infractions a lot because I think cheating is certainly a thing that's happening in our community, but we shouldn't really care what the person's intent is. If I make an honest mistake that gives me an advantage in the game, at the end of the day, there's no difference between that honest mistake where, for sake of argument, I move my orc boys 8 inches instead of 6 with the normal movement. If that's an honest mistake versus if I intentionally did it, the same effect is still on the table. So we should not be caring about what player intent is, and that shouldn't factor into the penalties. So that's why I'm going to be saying infractions, because we're going to kind of mirror what we're seeing in professional sports. There's no professional football team this season that has gone unpenalized. There have been flags on every team. That's not necessarily that every team is intentionally breaking the rules. Mistakes happen. There's been no perfect game of 40k ever played, and we need to try to get away from penalizing based on intent. Next is there needs to be different infractions carrying different penalties. Obviously, some infractions are smaller than others. For instance, like I just alluded to, sake of argument, I move my boys a few inches further than they're supposed to be able to move. That might be a minor infraction as compared to, say, when I'm rolling dice, picking up the wrong number of dice. So I say I'm shooting you 12 times and I pick up 14, getting some extra shots like that, or maybe lying to your opponent about your profiles. There can be different degrees of mistakes, and there can be different degrees of advantages gained from them. So every infraction shouldn't carry the same penalty. I'm not here to tell you guys what is the correct penalty to infraction conversion. I think we need to get a group of experienced judges together to work on something like this, but that's for a different discussion. Infractions generally should start with a lower penalty. This is going to allow players that make mistakes to learn from those mistakes without significant detriment to their game and their event overall. It's also going to make other opponents feel a little less guilty necessarily if they're calling over a judge and an infraction being issued. And it's going to allow judges a little bit more comfort when it comes to issuing those infractions, knowing that the first infraction maybe doesn't carry a serious penalty to the player. Now, importantly though, these penalties should exponentially increase if you're repeating the fraction. So we're going to go back to my 8-inch movement example. If I make that mistake in round 1 of an event, my opponent catches it, a judge catches it, whatever, I'm issued the infraction. If I continue the rest of the event moving my models an extra 2 inches, then the penalty should become more severe because I was alerted to my misplay. I should correct that if I am trying to play the game correctly. And then subsequent times, I should be getting a more severe penalty with each of them. So I think we need to kind of overhaul the infraction system in general. I think we need to get a good experienced group of judges together to work on something like that, to make something a little bit more applicable to what we're doing on the tabletop. Next up, increasing player reporting. This is the speech that every judge has at the beginning of every event, which is, please, we can't do anything easily after the game is played, but we can certainly help you during the game. So we need to encourage players to call judges at the time of the infractions. That allows the judges to correct the situation and try to get the game continuing on forward in the most honest fashion possible. And it allows the judges to track those infractions as they're happening. So if we are seeing those repeat offenses of the same infraction, they can take action. I honestly don't have a great idea here, but again, I'm not the one trying to tell everyone exactly how to do it. We as a community need to find a way to incentivize players to report. And again, I think that could be something with an experienced group of TOs, maybe bouncing around some ideas on how we can encourage our players to more commonly report infractions when they're seeing them at the time of the infraction versus maybe afterwards or on a Reddit forum or something like that. Next up is active judging. Active judging versus passive judging. Passive judging has kind of been a thing in the community for a long time. That's where maybe if I'm the judge, I walk by a game, I see something that's incorrect. So I'm seeing a model that maybe is moved incorrect or placed incorrectly, or I see a player rolling the wrong number of dice or pulling the wrong results. I, as a passive judge, don't intervene in that game unless the opponent calls me and says, Judge, I think he's not rolling the correct number of dice. And then I can come and intervene in the game and potentially issue some infractions. Active judging is the opposite of that. I, as the judge, walk by, I observe something that's being done incorrect. I immediately intervene. I don't wait for either player to call me over to adjust the rule. I step in. Active judging is definitely the way of kind of the future. A lot of events have started doing active judging, and we should encourage events to do that. We want them to do that. The problem is active judging takes more time and effort from our judges. But it does improve everyone's experience. So we really need to be pushing our community to push our TOs to allow judges to be active judges. Now, we're going to be limited by the total number of judges. Very large events are going to never have enough judges. We're talking about even a small GT, a 32-player GT that has 2 judges. That's 1 judge per 16 players. That's 1 judge per 8 tables. There's a lot to see on 8 tables at the same time. So there's always going to never be enough judges. So we need to have a way as a community to kind of focus our judges' efforts into the areas that are going to be the most impactful for us and kind of bring up the overall experience for everyone. And that's where we get into our next point. We need a tracking of infractions. We need to get the data essentially in who are the people that are frequently making mistakes, what are these mistakes, and are they improving from them? So we're talking about doing this both within a single event. So obviously in an event, if you see the same player making the same mistakes round after round, you can track that and intervene. And if we see across multiple events that this player always seems to make a few infractions and they always seem to be of the same type, that might be a point where someone needs to have a discussion with that player. It's going to allow judges to better focus their effort during events. So if, for instance, I'm a judge at an event, like I said, let's say it's a 32-person GT, there's 2 of us, and we know that there's 4 problematic players based on previous data, we can make sure that we're stopping in on those 4 tables every round to make sure everything's okay, as well as checking the rest of the tables. It allows the judges to better focus their efforts to make sure that there's a better experience from everyone. If you're a problematic player, and you've had some problematic behavior and you've really sat down and looked at yourself and you're trying to improve, it gives you that opportunity to have evidence that you are improving. So if I, sake of argument, I'm the problematic player, I have a few events where I accrue significant numbers of infractions, and then I kind of sit down, I decide I want to improve, I don't want to do this anymore. And if we go and I say, hey, look, here's this tracking system that everyone reports to. You can see for the last year I've been going to events and I have been getting minimal number of infractions as compared to what I used to be. You have that evidence to show you're improving and give these players a path back into the community. The problem with a tracking system, and importantly, I'm saying tracking system. I'm not saying the system should issue penalties. I think that's going to be up to the individual judges and TOs if they want to allow problematic players to play at their events. But giving those judges and TOs the data to make those decisions, I think is what's most important right now. And this is the thing that no one ever wants to talk about. Games Workshop will not support this. They have been against any form of organized tracking of infractions or penalty system. This means that they don't use red cards or yellow cards at their events. I know that a lot of events and event circuits have privately asked players not to attend, and they've kept track of these things, and because they've kept track of these individual infractions, they are able to make those decisions. But GW is not going to do this, so we as the community have to do this if we want it to be international, community-wide tracking. So keep that in mind. We can't rely on GW to do this. We're going to have to do it ourselves, and maybe, just maybe, they'll come along for the ride. All right, so what are the next steps here? I think we need to make this infraction system, and so I am volunteering more or less to be the guy in the community to help organize the forming of an independent infraction tracking organization. Someone out there can come up with a much better name than I've come up with, but we need to formalize a group of individuals that are going to do this work. Along with that, we need to have a group of experienced judges look at our current infraction system and look at ways to revamp it, including recommendations on penalties based on the type of infraction and that escalating or exponentially increasing scale of penalties based on the repeat. And that will at least give judges out there in events a guideline to work from. Ultimately, though, if you're not a judge and you're not a TO, but you want to help, the community itself is going to have to encourage judges and TOs to join into these systems. Judges and TOs might be reluctant at first to report to an organization that tracks infractions because they might worry that that might scare off some members of the community. It also might, if I'm a judge and I have to go follow another system, that's another set of work that I have to do when I'm probably, volunteering most of my time. But if the community demands this of our events and demands this of our judges, we will see judges start to volunteer to be part of this program. Like I said, I'm not the guy that has all the answers. I'm not even saying I'm the guy that needs to run these organizations. I'm just the one saying, here's the idea, and I'm willing to be the guy to step out into the community and try to organize and get this going. So if you're interested in being involved in something like this, reach out to me. I'm on Facebook, obviously, and Discord, but easiest way to get hold of me is email, and that's seththemaddog@gmail.com. I'll also have it in the description of this video. Hopefully this gives you folks some ideas on how we can improve as a community. I love to hear feedback. This is actually the second time I've recorded this video because I recorded it and I sent it out to a few friends and I got a bunch of feedback, and that's already been things that I've thought about and said, hey, that's a good idea. Let's put it in here. So I think this is going to be the kind of the driving ideas that I'm going to be working with for a while to try to help us as a community improve. And even if I can get just a little bit better than we were last year, that's better than it was. And I'm going to be happy for the effort. And ultimately, if I try to step out and do something like this and it fails and someone, like GW comes and slaps me on the wrist for doing something like this, at least I tried. And I didn't bring anyone else down with me. I'm doing this on my own. I'm not affiliated with anyone. So I hope you folks enjoyed this. I hope it gave you something to think about. I hope it starts a conversation. Feel free to reach out to me. Until next time, this is Seth the Mad Dog saying have a good one and take it easy.